All right, back here on CBS Sports HQ, we have another week of college football chaos. That means we have a whole new CBS Sports college football power rankings coming your way as we're heading into week 9 of college football. Oregon, the Ducks, in the top spot. Of course, beating Ohio State 2 weeks ago, then they get a blowout win over Purdue, so they're in that top spot. And it was a wild week in the SEC. The Dogs taking down top-ranked Texas. They come in at number 2. Texas now at number 6. Tennessee, I think they need to get some insurance policy out on the goalposts in Tennessee because they just keep upsetting people and ripping those things out of the ground. All to say they beat Bama. They're at 13. Bama is at 14. As we enter week 9, there have been 4 different teams in that number 1 spot on the CBS Sports College Football Power Rankings. So we'll see just how long Oregon can hold on to that top spot. These are Brandon Marcello's Power Rankings, by the way. We have Brandon Marcello joining us and then Danny Kanell with us in studio. We were talking about Oregon, and the Big Ten is just making things kind of spicy. We have 3 undefeated Big Ten teams in the top 10 of these power rankings, Brandon. We have Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State. Is this something you were anticipating as we've been heading farther into the season? Because it's kind of making things a little interesting as we're heading towards that Big Ten title game, Brandon.
It's not too surprising to see 3 Big Ten teams in the top 10, but Indiana? Yeah. No one was expecting that. Incredible run here by Indiana and just proving themselves with the blowout of Nebraska, 56-7, just on point offensively. Defensively showing up with turnovers. Now their quarterback, Curtis Rourke, is out with an injured hand going into a tough matchup against Washington, so we'll see how they bounce back from that. But I'll tell you what, the Big Ten is proving itself to maybe be the strongest conference out there in college football. The SEC is just beating up and eating up each other right now, and that will happen at some point here with the Big Ten. But Ohio State and Oregon showing that they're worthy of being in that top 3, obviously with Oregon winning that head-to-head matchup, but a lot of football left to be played and a lot of movement to be had.
Oh, my goodness. People in the South, their minds just blown by you saying that the Big Ten could actually be better than the SEC. And, of course, there's a lot of football left to be played, so we'll see how that unfolds. I love the story of Oregon. I picked them as the national champion before the season, and yet saying that, we've talked about the turnover that we've seen at the number 1 spot. Probably this season, more than the last 15 years that I've covered college football, I have less conviction who at this point is going to be the national champion than ever before. And by the way, I think it's awesome that we're in this place too, because this season has been so much fun. There's more parity than ever before. You have stories like in Indiana, who's shocking the world and undefeated at this point for the first time in 50 years. It's incredible. You've got Ohio State, who's no surprise to the party here. And then you have Penn State as well. As you look at Indiana's schedule, and, you know, Brandon mentioned it there, the fact that they have these next 2 games, it'll be really interesting. I think they should be undefeated against Michigan and possibly favored in that game, which is nuts when you think about it, considering the 2 histories of those 2 programs and how things have kind of fallen apart. But I do think the Curtis Rourke injury is significant. Like, it's not just easy to replace a player who's been playing quarterback as good as anybody in the country, so they will have their challenges. I do want to look at Penn State, though, because Penn State is the one on here who I'm a little bit like, I think they're good, and they did beat USC, but we just saw USC lose to Maryland. So Penn State is going to have their challenge against Ohio State here. That's when we'll find out, really, I think, if Penn State belongs in this conversation. I think they do, based on the improvements from Drew Aller in that pass game. But, man, this has been an incredible start to the year for the Big Ten, for sure. You can't argue that.
I feel like that's how everybody describes Penn State, right? Like, I think they're good
right?
until they play like an Ohio State or a Michigan. Then that's when we really know what they look like. But they look good up until this point. Brandon, a couple of other teams to kind of keep our eye on. I know a lot of our CBS Sports family was very high on SMU coming into the season in a new conference. They have looked really strong there, as you see them at number 19. But right above that, Brandon, is Pitt. They are 6-0. They are 18 on your power rankings. These 2 teams will meet in a couple of weeks as well. They'll face off against one another. What is it about these 2 teams that college football fans, what should we know about them going into this point of the season?
Well, Pitt completely revamped their offense, and it looks so much more explosive than it was last season. They're a lot of fun to watch offensively. And, of course, they're just going to take on the personality of Coach Narduzzi, of the hard-nosed guy. But, man, they are explosive offensively. They can keep up with anybody in the ACC right now. I can't wait to see them go to Dallas and have to play SMU here in a couple of weeks for a game that I've been looking forward to the last 2 weeks, because these are the two teams that are just kind of lurking in the shadows in the ACC, waiting for Clemson or Miami to trip up so they can grab a spot potentially in the ACC championship game. And Miami, as we know, has some close calls. Maybe they're the one that has that happen. Clemson, of course, still has to play Pitt later this season, but a big, big game coming up here in a couple weeks between SMU and Pitt. SMU, offensively, they have really picked things up with finally having a quarterback here that they really can have confidence in the last 3 weeks. And defensively, they don't get enough love there. Their rushing defense allowing less than 100 yards per game. They're sacking the quarterback. They're getting it done on the road on the West Coast and Stanford this past week. Two really great teams that aren't getting enough love right now, but they will when they face off head-to-head in Dallas in a couple of weeks.
I think the thing that's really interesting is Pitt doesn't they play Clemson. SMU doesn't play Clemson or Miami, so a lot of their games, they control their own destiny here, especially with that Pitt coming to town. I got an interesting scenario that could unfold, Brandon, too, and I think it's becoming more of a likelihood that because Louisville just beat Miami, if Miami runs the table, which I think we all think they probably will, and then if Clemson runs the table, which we think they will, they'll both face each other in the ACC championship game. So then SMU is in a really good position where if they win out, they could finish the season 11-1, not have to play Clemson and Miami, and they say, here you go, committee, here's our resume, with our only loss being to BYU, who's potentially a top 25 team, and they only lost by 3 points. Like, it was, I hate the term, but it's a good loss. It is an incredible story, and I think if you're an ACC fan or if you're Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, then you start saying, hey, I know we've talked about multiple teams from different conferences, but if we have two top-tier teams, Miami and Clemson, playing in the ACC title, don't forget about SMU as potentially a third ACC team making that playoff potentially.
All right, so Brandon, we're going to have some fun here. We actually want you to rank these two. We have blind resumes, so they're very similar resumes. We want you to take a look. Team A, Team B, look at the resumes, the win-loss, all of it, and tell us who you think each team is.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Welcome to Monday.
Win-loss of Power 4 teams beaten. I'm going to say that 6-1 team is... My goodness.
This is hard.
It is hard.
This is very hard. A lot of criteria. Okay, yeah, there you go. Sure, it's Texas and Illinois.
So who
that
should
Texas one is very. I thought I was probably about to say Texas. Texas's schedule has not been great. I think that those coaches and the fans there very much would have rather have played Georgia earlier in the season. Not necessarily because they thought maybe they could win it even still, but because at least they would have had a better handle of who they are offensively and defensively and where they stack up, instead of now being past the halfway point of the season where now we're going, hey, who's the quarterback? What are they going to do offensively in the future? It's a very bad spot for them to have their very first tough game. And that's bad for them because we thought Michigan was going to be better than they are. We weren't expecting them to be number one like last season, but Michigan much worse than they were than we were expecting. So, yeah, Texas, man, very bad spot.
I love it. That's a submission from Tom Fornelli, our resident.
Fighting Tom Fornelli.
Yes, exactly. And I think the point that he's trying to make is just when we look at things and you have to consider, like, preseason expectations, they do matter in our sport, and they impact the sport greater than in the NFL because the rankings don't matter. Power rankings don't matter. In college football, they do because it gets you access to the college football playoff. And Illinois has been outstanding. I mean, I was nervous because on our college football pregame show, which Tom Fornelli joined us, all five of us liked Illinois not only to cover the 4 points, but to win the game. And it's like, uh-oh, are we all wrong? No, we were all 1,000% right that they were just a better football team. But because of the perception of Michigan, the tradition, the fact they were national champions last year, Illinois had to overcome that. It's a constant battle for teams like Indiana, for Pitt, for Illinois to have to change the perception of voters and the committee themselves to say, you know what, we might have been flying under the radar and maybe we don't have a lot of 4 and 5 stars and a $20 million salary to spend on our talent, but we have really good football teams. And I think if they keep winning, there's no doubt they'll be in that conversation in the end.
Danny,
hey, real quick, I wanted to say, Illinois going on the road at Oregon, that's a huge spread in that game. But if Illinois can just play the way it does and play ball control offensively, this is a dangerous spot for Oregon this week.
We all had something to say about the disparity here. But Danny, really quickly to your point, one's ranked 5, one is ranked 20. I know you talked about changing the perception of voters and everything, but even still, is 20 still a little disrespectful?
Oh, 100% it's disrespectful. I mean, there's a bunch of other teams too in there, and I don't know if we're ripping on Brandon so much as the AP Top 25 as well.
No, definitely the AP Top 25, Brandon. Okay?
Yes. But there are other teams. I look at LSU, who's been good, and they have the win against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is another team that's still ranked there with 2 losses. You're like, wait a second, what are we doing? And it goes throughout. Illinois is not the only team that's being disrespected by the rankings, and all these teams that have higher preseason expectations, because you do have to adjust your thinking about teams once we get more information. It's hard to do because you come in with these preconceived notions. I do it myself. Like, I still have Miami probably higher than most people because I picked them to win the ACC, but I'm starting to shift my mindset. And you know what? Clemson, even though they lost to Georgia and it wasn't pretty, Clemson might be the best team in the ACC.
Yeah, it's just the whole expanded college football playoff, and it's really it's changed our mind on how we think about football. To continue the bullying of Brandon Marcello's rankings here, Brandon, last week we gave you some grief for not having Navy in your top 25. Welcome to the party as they take over that 25th spot alongside Army at 22. Brandon, we've talked about the scenario in which we see these two teams play for the American championship the week before, and then they play their regularly scheduled game, the Service Academy game, the following week there. What is it about these two service academies this year that you went, they have to be in the power rankings this week?
Well, they're both playing amazingly well with great quarterbacks, and they are just executing beyond measure. I mean, Army especially, every single week, it doesn't matter who they're going up against. They just seem to be cracking new numbers and new records. I mean, Daly there, he had scored 6 touchdowns this past week. Incredible stuff. I can't wait for Notre Dame Navy this week in New Jersey. That is going to be an amazing scene, an amazing atmosphere, but also Notre Dame kind of been slowly rising up their rankings since that loss in Northern Illinois. Now you got to face a service academy that's obviously going to do things differently in the run game. That is going to be quite the challenge. And also, how great is it we're going to see 2 quarterbacks, Riley Leonard at Notre Dame, and also with Navy, 2 running quarterbacks doing some things on the ground. Old-fashioned football coming up Saturday between those 2, and potentially a playoff spot on the line.
No doubt, Brandon, this story has been awesome. And you mentioned it, Notre Dame. Remember when they lost to Northern Illinois? It was like, oh, who are they going to play? It's going to be a resume builder. It was like, well, all they have is Florida State and USC left. Who would have thought that those teams would have been cakewalks for them? And all of a sudden, we're looking at the resume builders as Army and Navy as top 25 wins for the Fighting Irish if, and it's a big if, they do beat them. I wanted to highlight Bryson Daly, the Army quarterback, because you mentioned the 6-touchdown performance he had this weekend. We've talked so much about Ashton Genty and the phenomenal numbers that he's putting up out at Boise State. Does anybody know who's leading the country in rushing touchdowns? You would think it would be the best running back in the country, but it's not. It's actually Bryson Daly, who has 19. He has 1 more rushing touchdown than Ashton Genty, and yet no one is talking about him, mentioning him in the Heisman conversation. If he could pull off a big, if he wins the rest of his games and beats Notre Dame, I'm assuming it's because of big performance of him, then we absolutely will be. But I think people should start keeping an eye on Bryson Daly, the Army quarterback, as a potential Heisman candidate based on the numbers he's putting up, based on the season Army's having. It's been phenomenal. And I do think Army is the slightly better chance of them beating Notre Dame and taking this thing home and winning the American Conference. But it has been both. It's been an incredible story for both these teams.
Yeah, I hope one of them gets into the college football playoff.
Oh, it'd be
awesome.
Chaos. Give me all the chaos. Brandon Marcello's Power Rankings. We break them down every single week. Danny Kanell joining us as well to talk about it. You can hear more from Danny on the Cover 3 podcast. The latest episode has Week 8 instant reactions. I'm sure they've got plenty of content to get you caught up as we push ahead in the college football season. But make sure you are locked in to the Cover 3 podcast by scanning that QR code on your screen.